If you turned on your TV at night in the 1980s, there was a good chance you'd flip to one of Robert Tilton's late-night infomercials. His show, Success in Life, brought in $80 million per year preaching prosperity gospel. It was so successful that it aired on all 235 American television markets through the 80s and 90s. Tilton eventually went from being one of the wealthiest televangelists of his time to being a parody of himself. Just how did he fall all the way from the top? Tilton was born in 1946 in McKinney, Texas. He attended Cooke County Junior College before heading off to Texas Technological University. Before life on the little screen, Tilton was a good Catholic nobody. Tilton's conversion to evangelical ministry began the following year after he married his first wife, Martha, which would later dissolve after a series of lawsuits. In 1974, Tilton and his family hit the road on a preaching road trip. His career had officially begun. He preached to small crowds throughout Texas and Oklahoma. He later settled in Dallas with his family in 1976, where he built the Word of Faith Family Church, a small, charismatic church in Farmers Branch, Texas. He started a local television program known as Daystar through the church, but nothing ever became of it. We don't believe there's any relation between Tilton's Daystar TV in the 70s and the Daystar TV of today. Well, other than how both entities scam gullible viewers of their hard-earned cash. Tilton needed a stroke of inspiration, so he decided he'd go on a pilgrimage, like when Jesus spent 40 days in the desert. However, Tilton's pilgrimage in the desert was a vacation to Hawaii. He did find the inspiration he was looking for when he discovered Dave Del Dotto's get-rich-quick infomercials. Dotto was known for his hour-long segments showing off his luxurious life in Hawaii and peddling his get-rich-quick real estate books. Tilton returned from his pilgrimage, and revamped Daystar into a late-night infomercial named Success in Life. He got by with a little help from his friend Herman Beebe, a Dallas banker and fraudster with rumored ties to organized crime. Beebe's $1.3 million loan got Success in Life off the ground in 1981. Tilton would ask his viewers for vows through his show and claim that all the bad things in your life resulted from sin. Tilton's website, which is still active to this day, explained that to be blessed by God in the future, you need to make a vow to him now through his ministry. Tilton emphasized that an effective vow goes beyond your natural resources, meaning we should give all we have and even borrow from friends. After all, this is a vow to God. The following is published on his website. I don't need much faith to vow $100 if I have $2,000 in a savings account, but if I can barely pay my bills, then a $100 vow will stretch my faith indeed. Tilton never shied away from his asking of followers for more money. The average donation was about $1,000, but Tilton claimed God wanted more. He'd ask people to give him practically everything they had and that God would take care of their day-to-day needs. For someone that believes so much in giving all you have, he sure didn't take his own advice. Tilton said and did some outrageous things during his infomercials. He'd go on complete tangents in which he'd speak in tongues to perform miracles on TV. No, he wasn't speaking some form of ancient Latin or demonic language. He was speaking nonsense words, comparable to a sputtering muffler on a dying car. He'd make outlandish claims that he'd cured dwarfism and mysterious intestinal problems. Thankfully, through the power of money, television, and absurdity, he healed learning disabilities in children. How did anybody take this guy seriously? The show ran testimonials of viewers who gave to his ministry and received miracles in return, a practice that would serve as the basis for a lawsuit from his donors later on. But as crazy as that all seems, enough people believed Tilton to fork over $80 million per year. Was it because of the fact that he'd assure his viewers time and time again that he was not making this up?
I don't make this stuff up.
The popularity of his show shot Tilton to the top when the World of Faith Church grew to 8,000 members. While 8,000 might not be much by today's standard, it was a lot back in the mid-'80s. Other than preaching, Tilton is a successful author. Some of his books include God's Law of Success, The Power to Create Wealth, You Shall Eat the Riches of Gentiles, and our absolute favorite, How to Pay Your Bills Supernaturally. Who knew supernatural money was an accepted payment method? Tilton was living the good life between his book sales, donations, and cushy $200,000 salary. salary. So the question begs, how did such a successful preacher hit rock bottom? The early 90s brought the beginning of the end for Tilton. He was accused of being a con artist, someone who'd manipulate his followers for personal gain. He pocketed his tax-exempt donations and dared to ask for more. Fellow televangelists Jim Swaggart and Jim Bakker had already fallen from grace. Tilton was next on the diving board. Primetime Live, a popular show hosted by Diane Sawyer, was ready to push him off. Much of ABC's research was derived from a guy named Ole Anthony, who heads the Dallas-based Trinity Foundation, a self-described watchdog of televangelists. Anthony played the undercover role of a Dallas pastor looking to break into televangelism game. The ABC News team portrayed Anthony's media consultants. He and ABC set up a meeting with Tilton's media team and learned just how deep Tilton's scheming ran. Apparently, his mailing campaigns ran through a slick marketing company called Response Media. Jim Moore, the director of Response Media, had no idea that he was about to divulge the full spectrum of Tilton's mail campaigns on hidden camera. Basically, Tilton would send gimmicks to people on his mailing list and request something back. Of course, that something was money. According to Moore, Tilton was doing far better than anybody knew. Moore did refuse to disclose how much Bakker paid him to handle his dirty mail. However, in a ditch effort to hook Anthony into signing with Response Media, Moore disclosed what happens with all the letters. Tilton never touches them. Instead, they get sent right to the bank where they're opened and any money is deposited into Tilton's account. Then Tilton gets the letters. But come on, do you think Tilton was reading all those letters? Ole Anthony didn't think so either. Anthony and the ABC team went dumpster diving outside Tilton's banks and found tens of thousands of discarded prayer cards. The steaming pile of garbage was broadcast in a segment called The Apple of God's Eye, Primetime Live in 1991. Sawyer went on air in a follow-up to the broadcast and talked more about the discarded prayer cards that they'd found. Over 30 days, Anthony and the undercover team found dumpsters full of prayer requests 14 separate occasions. The end was near for Tilton. At a 1991 press conference, Anthony set up an elaborate display of discarded prayer cards he humorously dubbed Tilton's Wheel of Fortune. Allegations against Tilton started pouring out. Those who worked for Tilton claimed he had means of monitoring their calls, and they were not allowed to talk to a caller for more than 7 minutes, no matter how badly they needed a prayer. Money was the number one goal, and workers were instructed to get money from callers first, foremost. Tilton went on the defensive after the airing of The Apple of God's Eye, and Anthony's Wheel of Fortune made a mockery of his name. On November 22nd, Tilton aired an episode of Success in Life titled Primetime Lies. Tilton claimed the entire thing was a setup. ABC had stolen the prayer cards from his church, planted them in dumpsters for what he called sensational camera shots. He claims to have prayed over every card received, so much so that the ink went to his brain and triggered 2 minor strokes. Clearly, the only thing that went to Tilton's head was the money. The lawsuits piled up. One woman was awarded $1.5 million after it was revealed her donation, which was intended for a family crisis center, went into Tilton's wallet. The crisis center was never built, nor were there ever plans to build one. Sadly, Tilton got the judgment reversed by a team of savvy lawyers. Tilton's viewership numbers reduced drastically in the wake of all the scandals and lawsuits. Texas Attorney General Dan Morales attempted to strip Tilton's church of its nonprofit status and transfer ownership to the state. The decline of Success in Life led to the end of his 25-year marriage, who had been administrative head of the Word of Faith Family Church and World Outreach Center. Tilton bounced around a lot after The Apple of God's Eye. In 1994, Tilton tried to revive his TV success with a new show called Pastor Tilton. On Pastor Tilton, everyone's favorite disgraced preacher would perform what's called demon blasting. What's demon blasting, you ask? For Tilton, it involved screaming and shouting, loud as he could, at someone believed to be possessed by demons. We're pretty sure the Warrens would have something to say about that, as well as the Vatican. The show was a colossal failure, and as a result, didn't see the dawn of the new year. In 1997, Tilton got up to his old tricks again when he revived Success in Life Fort Lauderdale. The once dead show aired on BET during a 2-hour nightly block of religious programming called BET Inspiration. However, most of the show recycled old footage from the early 90s and testimonials from the 80s. Tilton officially dissolved the World of Faith Church in 1996, and the building was bought by the town and eventually demolished in 2003. Today, Tilton is still active on Facebook, where his page has around 3,500 likes. However, the link to his website brings you right back to his old stance on vowing, cough up that stimulus money, folks, because God needs it more than you do. But don't worry, he'll make it up to you later. Click here to watch one of these next videos.